We have talked about the circulatory system and quite a bit about pressures. We reviewed the components of a blood pressure on day 1, but as a review, we remember pressure in the system is a product of the cardiac output and the resistance. This is regulated by the total volume in the system, the volume's location, whether it's pulled in the veins or pushed into the arterial side. We touched on the importance of the stroke volume and how the stretch principle and contractility affect the output. Finally, we have the afterload, or the resistance of the heart has to work against with each beat. All these determine the pressure in the system. If we can recall the pressure volume loop that we discussed early on, this dealt with the left ventricle. Today we are going to take a look at the aortic side of that pressure loop. You've seen the arterial pressure tracings before. We see the rapid spike in pressure once the aortic valve opens up. This correlates with ventricular ejection. However, as the ventricle ejects and the aorta is distended to accommodate that extra volume, this softens the blow that the aorta feels in systole and stores the pressure as potential energy. The amount of distensibility that the aorta can handle to accommodate the stroke volume is termed the compliance. The highest value in the arteries during ejection is going to be our arterial pressure. As contraction of the left ventricle ends, pressures in the left ventricle and aorta drop at the same rate until the pressure in the aorta is greater than the pressure in the left ventricle. This slams the semilunar valve closed. At this time, we see a notching on the aortic pressure curve and a slight increase, known as the dicrotic notch. This is due to the valve closing and the stored blood from the compliant aorta entering the rest of the arterial system, maintaining it during the ventricular diastole. Next, the aortic pressure slowly tapers off over time. The rate of decline is based on the resistance of the system. This is due to the valve integrity and the resistance of the arterioles. The lowest pressure that we measure in the arterial system during this time is going to be the diastolic value. This pressure will continue to drop until there is another heartbeat. If we remember our components of blood pressure equation, we are reminded that pressure is equal to the stroke volume times the heart rate times the resistance. We can manipulate these variables to see an increase in any of them is going to lead to an increase in pressure. You will do some practice in class and try and figure out what changed in the system to yield a new pressure value. There are a couple of rules that I want you to remember. Contractility is related to the stroke volume. It exerts the most influence during systole. A cheap surrogate marker for the stroke volume is the pulse pressure. And remember, pulse pressure is equal to the systolic minus the diastolic value. Dr. Luss talks about this in terms of the add-on value to the diastolic. Resistance is a property of the arterioles. It is not only a component of afterload and decreases the stroke volume, but the heart spends 2/3 of its time in diastole, so there is a greater influence on the diastolic value than the systolic. And finally, isolated changes in the heart rate do nothing to the system other than speed it up. I hope these help you work through some problems in class and help you throughout your studies. Thank you for watching, and good luck.